welcome. Today we're going to talk about just the practicality of building AR/VR solutions for enterprise, because that tactical piece is really important. We understand what the technology does, but how do we get something built? How do we get a POC? How do we get funding? So I will let my two co-panelists introduce themselves quickly.
So I start. My name is Cécile Eskenazi. I'm the creator and host of A VR Journey, which is a web show for consumers about AR, VR, and also 360 video, which is why I always have my camera with me. And I used to head up product marketing at Ericsson in the Chief Innovation Office, focusing on AR, VR, which is where I got my taste for VR for enterprise.
Hi, I'm Rika Nakazawa, and I have a hollow echo going on here. I'm based in San Francisco. I'm co-chair of the Enterprise Committee together with Amy with the VR ARA. I'm also a strategic advisor for a couple of ventures in the VR AR space. One is an enterprise AR machine vision company, and the other is social VR platform. And have been in the space of technology disruption for a long time and have been an executive at places like NVIDIA and Accenture, and most recently with Frog Design. It's all about human-centered design, which is an inherent component of how we think about where things are going and how products and services are being designed to optimize VR AR experiences. So thank you for having me here today.
Oh, move this closer. Okay. So we can hear. Is that better? So we don't have a ton of time to do sort of a full panel, so I put together 3 questions for us to sort of talk about, and we'll save some time at the end, hopefully, to answer any questions you might have. So the first thing we want to talk about is that my slide doesn't quite fit, but we've seen a lot of some of the use cases here, this week and at a lot of these conferences. But I thought that we could talk about a few that we're seeing out there and how they're relevant. And the reason I wanted to start with this is that one of the key strategic elements is build for the win. And so looking in your particular vertical and what kinds of solutions your business needs. So I thought maybe we'd start with that. And Rika, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the enterprise AR machine vision services company that I've been advising called Gravity Jack. We had a TechCrunch article that came out a couple of months ago and have been getting besieged by inquiries on the technology, which is essentially object intelligence with 6DoF, called 6 Degrees of Freedom. And the reason why that has some compelling use cases in industry, particularly in automotive and industrial use cases, is because the ability to actually identify a part with 6 degrees of freedom has applications around parts picking, which one mistake can hold up a production line. The errors around it can be tens of thousands of dollars with just one mistake, as an example. And as well as with assembly and storage of different pieces of a machine, as you can imagine. And then, of course, the use cases that most of you have been hearing about is really around training and maintenance. So one GE 6000 LM, I think I had the acronym somewhat mixed up, but one of those engines to do clutch replacement can cost millions of dollars. So the ability to be able to manipulate and use machine vision as a service to be able to service that brings that cost down to 2/3 of that in some cases, and that's in the early days of what we've been seeing with the platform. So those are some of the areas, and as well as healthcare. With the ability to do 6DoF, you can actually take a textureless mannequin, which up until then, in an application using HoloLens, the idea was to nail the mannequin down or superglue it down to the table, which obviously in the real world is not going to work if you want to superglue a human being down. But with the ability to actually apply surgical training and actually be able to use that on a real human being, those are the sort of things that are going to be the most compelling as we've seen it in some of the cases at Gravity Jack.
And Cecile, so can you talk about some of the things maybe that you were working on at Ericsson?
Yeah, so for me, one of the strongest use cases is just-in-time information using augmented reality. So having the right information at the right time in the right format, right in front in the line of sight of the worker in a work environment to leave them hands-free to perform their task and giving them really superpowers as they get the information they need. This is really helpful in industry environment and companies like elevator company like ThyssenKrupp. They use that for repairs of elevators. They use the HoloLens, and they found that they are able to perform their repair jobs in 20 minutes instead of 2 hours just using the HoloLens. In the industry as well, there's companies like Boeing. They use AR smart glasses to wire planes, and they have reduced their production time by 25%, and the error rates almost down to 0, also using smart glasses. Another one is GE. They also use the same technology, and there's been various studies with GE and other companies. On average, we see productivity gains of about 32%, which is huge. Another use case which is compelling, in my view, is communication and collaboration in a virtual space. So companies like Scope AR, they have solutions allowing to do live troubleshooting and communicating with a remote expert. So you have technicians in the field, they have an issue, they show what they see to the remote expert, and they are able to together solve a problem. And the third one, which is really important, is what is important for the design industry that you have there, is 3D model creation and visualization. Architects use that, for example. So we have a company called Gensler. They are the architecture firm that are building NVIDIA's new headquarters here in Santa Clara. And they used VR and AR every step of the way to improve their design processes. And they even use VR to show, to get a walkthrough of the new building before it's built so that the CEO could approve it.
That's good. So again, it's one of the first steps is identifying the right use case. Then moving forward. So I'd like to talk to you both a little bit about how companies should approach their initial foray into AR/VR. One of the things I do with my clients is we spend 2 weeks or a month talking to all the stakeholders, because there's a lot of times you might have 6 or 7 or 10 or even in the teens. Little silos ferreting away on their, pet AR/VR project. And sometimes there's an economy of scale, sometimes there's not, but it's important to kind of galvanize the troops and make sure that everybody's, on the same page and utilizing the resources effectively. So that's one challenge. What are some of the other things that you would share in terms of, getting buy-in, getting budget, and really getting a POC and a product off the ground?
So I would say start by being very clear about your budget and what your goal is. So you may have multiple goals, but you need to know exactly what's the direction you're going. So are you trying to reduce costs? Are you trying to improve productivity? Are you trying to have a better customer experience? Or maybe limit risks? Or just showing innovation? So depending on those goals, the solution will go into a different direction. And then I would say don't do it alone. Get an expert, get a company like Amy or a similar company who knows the ecosystem, they know the right partners, and they can advise you into which tool you use. And also, don't try and build everything from scratch. So start with the proof of concept and a demo, and maybe use existing tools. So use solution, I mentioned Scope AR. If you want to do VR collaboration, there's a really cool French startup called Mimesis. They use a Kinect to capture your full body, so you can see your full body in a VR experience in a shared environment. That's an example. If you want to do training and simulation, there's a company like Striver. There's plenty of players, so pick the right player to help you, because you're not going to become the VR expert in your company on your own. And then another thing that we use at Ericsson that was really powerful to get buy-in from stakeholders was to visualize what the solution would look like. So we actually asked artists to create drawings to illustrate what the solution would look like, and that helped us stimulate the imagination to build the right solution, and also to show that to all the stakeholders from the bottom to the very top to get the buy-in for the project.
Mm-hmm. Enrica, what's been your experience?
Everything she just said. I would add that it's really important to think about AR/VR as not an acronym, right? I think there's a fatigue that starts to wash over corporate executives' eyes when they think about this as a technology. It really is fundamentally about thinking about this as a paradigm shift in terms of how you're going to engage with your customers, whether that be a business customer, an end consumer, and in many cases your employees. And I was really impressed with some of the ways that Meta has been pushing the envelope and drinking their own Kool-Aid around this. If any of you heard Marin's keynote this morning, the fact that their whole organization is moving to a monitorless work environment is one of the ways that you really galvanize and get people to see the light, right, in many ways. And at the end of the day, no matter how many words you use to try to explain the beauty of this technology and why it is going to foretell the way that we're going to move from human-machine interface to what I say is still the same acronym, it's still human-machine I, but it's going to be human-machine integrate. And so the more that you can show people, right, with where the technology is going, about how we fundamentally converge digital, physical, and human, and ultimately as well the next generation of AI and how we're going to have these agents around us that are going to be secondary to us and yet also hopefully be the glue that enables us to be more social beings, is the way to elevate the conversation, that it's not about a utility, it's not about an app, it's really about participating in and being authors of and collectively being pioneers together within an organization that everybody can be on board with. And it starts, as Cecile was saying, you know, some of it is just by small experiments here and there. Don't try to bite off the whole thing. It's really about having those little points of light. I mean, we've all seen how one little experiment or how one little example of AR can actually illuminate people's faces, and you can just start with that. And that also ties back to human-centered way of thinking about this, right? It's not about the machine, it's not about the technology. Yes, those are important components of it, but how does this fundamentally work together with how we're all thinking about where things are going from a human-centered design and design thinking perspective? So that's the way that I would kind of think about how we talk to either our colleagues who are executives, or if some of your clients are executives, or even people that are just on the ground trying to do this work. Yesterday at a panel session, a woman was talking about upskill and how she's working on factory floors as one example. And the question was, well, how did the factory workers like it? I mean, it's this device that they had to wear, just that they loved it. Because all technology up until now, for the most part, has been addressing white-collar problems. And now this is something that's really illuminating that the blue-collar factory workers are feeling like they're able to take advantage of technology in a way that doesn't need a whole lot of explanation, hopefully. You just put the device on or look through the device, and then the magic can happen. So,
Well, I think that leads into our third question, which are then, you know, what are the considerations for long-term AR/VR development? And one of the challenges is, you know, once you take that step, you know, it's a long road, not just in evolving with the technology, but this is the next computing platform, particularly AR, and, you know, looking at in a lot of the ways that Rika just described, this sort of ubiquitous solution that changes the way we work, the way we interact, both socially and at work. And so there's this notion of scale, and how does this integrate into your existing data sources? What data are you going to be pulling out of VR to show the efficacy and the ROI behind these solutions? So what are some of the ways to really look at this as an end-to-end solution moving forward, and you know, really prioritizing the roadmap of building into AR and VR? So we don't have too much time, but if you guys can touch a little bit on that.
Okay, so I think the first thing is build on your experience. You've done your demo, you've done your prototype. Now you need to show that you're solving a real issue. So you can't really use technology for the sake of technology, and that's really important. So measure the ROI of your demo and your prototype, and then you're able to go through all your stakeholders and then get your budget approved, and then make sure you hire the right people. So you need to build a team, and then you need not just focus on technical people, you need to have also creative people who will define the right solution that will increase based on your goal, that will work in the long term. And to do that, you need to work with, to Rika's point, you need to work with people who are going to use the solution. So don't just design in your little lab and then push it down to them. You need to involve them every step of the way from the very beginning, early on in the process, so that when the solution is ready, they will use it and they'll be happy with it because they've been involved all along in the design. And then once you've got a first win, maybe you would expand, and you'll do that in other divisions, and you'll do that in various stages in your company. So I would say go step by step and be very concrete, work towards a very defined goal.
I would just say balance as well. I think it's going to be very important for us to remember to unplug. Sometimes that's where some of the out-of-the-box thinking happens, right? The art of the possible is the minute that you unplug. So when Archimedes sat in the bathwater, that's when he had the eureka moment. It wasn't when he was in his lab or trying to solve some deep computational problem. So I think in the long term, you know, rather than going down this rabbit hole and getting too wrapped up in the digital and all that, is unplugging. Time's up. Unplugging. So this afternoon, everybody take a walk outside, turn off your cell phones, and come back, and you might have new revelations of the future of VR AR.
Well, with that very indelicate, it was like being played off by a dog. It was terrible. Sorry about that, Rika. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Do we have time for?
Unfortunately not.
No, okay, all right, so-
What I'll do is to encourage the audience here to seek them out.
Yeah, and we'll get a copy of this, and whoever sent that will reply to you after this.
And thanks again to all of you. And it's really tough to go and do even a mini panel in 15 minutes.
That's why I had my little
I
clock
love
here.
that you policed yourselves too, so it's a monumental amount of effort. Let's give them an applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.